Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are looking at the SH Figuarts Trunks from Dragon Ball Super. This is a figure that many people were highly excited for. They were really excited for Trunks. It's always a good thing to get a new Trunks figure, or at least usually. Is it any good? Well, it does a lot of things really well. It has a couple questionable issues, and does a couple things not so well, but all in all, it's okay. So let's go ahead and get him off the stand and take a closer look. This guy stands just about 14 centimeters, which makes him just about, let's say 5.5 inches. Now, before we get into the review, I want to just make a quick note that I have started to implement a rating system at the end of my reviews. A lot of people have requested it over the years, and I have finally succumbed to the peer pressure of doing a rating system at the end of each review, so make sure you stick around for that at the end. Now, let's talk about this guy. First things first, it looks pretty good. In a lot of the photos, the hips look really wide compared to the shoulders, and it's definitely the case, but it's not as bad as it could be. It's definitely not as good as it could be, that's for sure. Typically speaking, Trunks has very narrow hips and relatively broad shoulders. These guys, it's pretty much straight up and down, so it looks a little bit weird. And don't say it's because the pants are poofy, because the pants aren't poofy at the waist. I mean, they are on the figure, but they shouldn't be, and that's the main problem, this area right in here. And then this should be a little bit V'd out, but once you pose them, it should hardly be noticeable, so I don't think that's going to bother most people. We do have a pretty clean paint job. You can see we have some buttons and snaps around on the jacket. The belt is done pretty well. The logo over here is okay, and then we have some shading throughout the pants. Boots are painted nicely. Overall, the aesthetic is definitely good enough. Nothing too glossy, a little bit of shiny stuff here in the arms, but overall it's not too bad. There is shading throughout the hair as well, so that brings him to life pretty nicely. As far as accessories go, we have a decent batch. We have, for the blue hair, we have the neutral face and then one yelling face. And then of course we do have his Super Saiyan hair, which is nicely shaded. We have the yelling face and the not so neutral, but kind of neutral face. Now I do want to point out for the Super Saiyan head, it looks to me like, now I haven't watched the show, but I have watched parts of the show. I'm still waiting to binge Super, so don't spoil anything for me. But it looks like this is the hair after he bulks up a little bit. That his hair shouldn't be quite so poofy in the back at this stage of his physique, but it's not terribly outdone, so I think it's okay. Overdone, that's the word. As far as other accessories go, we have a bunch of hands. We have the 2 fist hands, 2 gripping hands, 1 kind of relaxed hand, 2 kind of clenched hands, 1 with a peg hole in it, and then 2 wide open hands. We do of course have his sword, and the short version of his sword to go in the scabbard, and it can also go into the energy effect for the sword, which I think is called Sword of Hope or something like that. And then we also have his purple ball of doom, which pegs into his hand and is shaded really nicely. One thing I'm very pleased about is they did give you a clear display stand to help support the sword. That's very nice. However, it is keyed, so you cannot rotate it or really do anything with it other than leave it the way it is. It's still better than nothing, but it definitely could have provided a little bit more versatility. Before we get into the rest of the review, I'm just going to give you guys a quick comparison against the older version of Trunks, so you guys can see size-wise and overall aesthetic-wise what you think about that. I don't know that they're necessarily directly comparable, because you're not going to really get one or the other. If I had to guess, you're probably going to get one of each, but I do think this design is much more appealing than the redesign. And then just to see what he looks like up against Mr. Goku, I can't comment on the scaling really, because like I said, I haven't watched Super enough to comment on that, but you don't really need me to, because I gave you a height measurement and now you can see, so you can determine it for yourself. Alright, let's get into the articulation. This is where the figure does stumble a little bit in some cases. The neck, pop the head off so you can see it. The neck is probably one of the best implemented ball pegs for a neck we've seen on a Dragon Ball figure. Most of them are articulated but don't really function. This one functions really well, though it does get a little bit gappy in there, which is unfortunate given that we already have the scarf to hide that, but it does work really nicely. For the joint, it is our Dragon Ball Z ball hinge, which is not good because, especially with a really movable neck like this, it's almost impossible to pose this joint without taking the head off. So that kind of sucks. Luckily though, we don't have any issues like we did for Gotenks where the heads or the faces pop off. Come on. The relative looseness of the neck ball peg makes it sometimes tricky to peg the head on, but that's fine. But either way, you can pose them pretty well, no problem at all on the head. For the shoulder, we have a butterfly joint, which works pretty nicely. Doesn't look too bad. It does bring the arm across the chest, so I like that a whole bunch. Now here's the thing, we have our ball peg that connects the arm to the butterfly joint, and we have our ball hinge out here, and it looks like you'd get a ton of range, but watch. When I raise the arm, it hits something. Not on the outside, but on the inside. It's engineered such that you can't raise the arm anymore, even though you still have plenty of clearance. So that's a problem. I think you should definitely be able to raise the arm more, especially given that they cut that spot out. Now, you could have gone for the aesthetic look and not had that cutout, and then it would have been better, but now we don't have the range and we have the cutout, so that's a little bit weird. And it's the same on this side too, so I'm not sure what's going on. It's still definitely enough range. I mean, you'll be able to get most posing done, but it really shouldn't have that extra cutout if it doesn't function. Bicep swivel is fine. Double jointed elbow works no problem. Ball hinge wrists, you know, we've seen these all a million times. That's all as expected. For the torso, it feels like a single ball peg up here and then another ball peg at the bottom. I don't feel any hinges in there, which is a good thing. However, the ball pegs have very minimal range. You can lean them back a little bit. You can lean them forward a little bit, and that's about it. Side to side, fairly minimal, especially at the top joint. At the bottom joint, it's a little bit better. Rotation happens almost completely at the bottom joint, just a tiny bit at the top. The floating belt and bottom of the jacket, all one piece, doesn't really get in the way, so that's pretty good. For the hips, bringing them forward works no problem at all. Really, really nice range. Going back, he can do full-on splits, so that's really good. Going out side to side, we have the same issue we have with the shoulders. They're limited. I can't figure out why. It looks like it's being limited by the cap up here, but it's not. The cap's loose. They're not getting stopped by that. I mean, that's still probably enough range, but it doesn't seem to want to work, especially on this side. It just doesn't want to go. And I'm almost positive it's not the cap, because the cap is still free floating, so it's not like I'm binding it. So I don't quite know what's going on there. It's something internal. Thigh swivel is there, minimal, but okay. Double jointed knees work well enough. They're still not the best looking we've seen, but they'll get the job done. For the ankles, we have an actual ball hinge, which does lean back well enough. It leans forward, just a tiny bit. Definitely could be better in the range department there, though you do get a really proper ankle rocker out of it, so I do like that. And then lastly, we have a toe hinge, which is good enough. So ultimately, it's a really solid figure. It does a lot of things really well. The overall aesthetic and finish, pretty nice. Despite the shoulders being kind of narrow compared to the hips, it's not terrible. It's all right. And then we do have some shading and some paint, and the posability is good enough despite the few limitations that are there, which shouldn't be. I think it's okay overall. I think most fans are going to really like it, so that's a good thing. I guess the final verdict for this guy, let's give him 8 unnecessary redesigns out of 10. I think it's definitely good enough for most people. Some people will find some gripes, but still find pleasure in owning the figure. That'll do it, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I do have new videos up just about every single day, except for sometimes when there's a dry spell, so plenty of content here, over 3,000 videos. If you really need to watch something and there's nothing new in the morning, go ahead and check one of the playlists. There's plenty of other stuff to watch, and we do live stream 3 times a week where I design my own line of action figures, and sometimes we play video games and do other fun stuff. So make sure you come back for that, and in the meantime, keep collecting.